through the desert. Benny Mickelson has discovered documents that reveal how Israel would turn this unfavorable position to their advantage.
The purpose of the terrain analysis was to find routes of advance in such a way that we can bypass and attack the enemy from the direction that is not expected.
Mickelson has found a trafficability map, a map that shows exactly where vehicles could and could not travel.
The trafficability map is a final product of many years of research.
The important detail of this unique map of the Sinai is the distinctive form of color coding.
The colors are very, very simple. The white color is trafficable, the dark color is non-trafficable.
What the trafficability map reveals is that the Sinai Desert was not an insurmountable obstacle. There were a few key routes that were trafficable by military vehicles.
It's very funny to say it, but because of our deep research of years, we knew the possibility to use the ground in enemy territory better than the enemy itself.
Even knowing the best routes to attack the Egyptians, one thing was inevitable. It would all come down to a fierce tank battle in the Sinai. Tank historian David Fletcher has looked at the tanks the Israelis were basing their armored forces on in the early 1960s.
They started off pulling stuff out of scrapyards and then started buying up from used stocks from around the world where they could.
The one tank that was widely available was this late World War II model of the Sherman. Israel bought hundreds of them.
By the time the Israelis are putting these things in the field in large numbers, they are actually dealing with things like the T-54 and T-55, which effectively are the next generation of tank, with a far bigger and more effective gun.
How could the Israelis take on the Russian-built T-54 and T-55s with what was thought to be an inferior tank?
One thing the Sherman had proved during the Second World War was its adaptability. The possibility of putting an extra gun on or changing a gun, that sort of thing, was easy. And therefore, from the Israelis' point of view, it was an excellent tank to start work on.
This is an M51 Super Sherman tank with a radical Israeli makeover.
You cannot recognize the original one because we upgrade the firepower, the protection, and the mobility. We changed the caliber from the original 76mm to 105 French gun that it allowed us to hit any target on a distance of 1,000 meters without any correction.
They even modified the tracks for improved desert performance.
We increased the width and we changed the material in such a way that it improved very much the trafficability. We can see also that the protection, the armor, is completely new.
With the revamped Sherman and modifications to other tanks in their armory, the Israelis calculated they could take on the Egyptians in the Sinai.
So an Israeli tank is a souped-up version of someone else's tank. It's a little bit better on the theory that if you're just a little bit better than the enemy, you're going to win.
Within 36 hours of the Israeli attack in the Sinai, the Egyptian armored divisions were ordered to pull back. Many Egyptian soldiers couldn't understand this decision.
We felt that as an army, as a professional, we did not fight because no chance to fight.
The withdrawal that took place was the worst possible you could ever imagine. If you brought a military commander and asked him to put the worst possible withdrawal plan, nothing could have been worse than this.
During the retreat across the Sinai, the Egyptians suffered thousands of casualties and lost hundreds of tanks.
The damage was beyond any imagination. We never thought that we could do this kind of damage.
These blackened, twisted lumps of metal were once a mighty Egyptian division. What kind of power could have inflicted such all-consuming destruction? There has been speculation that Israel used a terrifying weapon, napalm.
Napalm is nothing more than petrol taken into a gelled state with the addition of gelling agents to make it a bit like hair gel or grease. Okay, here we have petrol. So in its normal state, it's very, very thin liquid, forms very, very thin droplets when there's an explosion next to it. By contrast, The napalm is much denser, and when there's an explosion next to it, it forms fairly large, dense droplets that can be thrown an awful lot further than the pure liquid and then go and adhere to the targets.
That's the theory. How do napalm and conventional gas explosives perform in practice? In this experiment, a container of gas will be detonated.
Firing in 3, 2, 1, firing.
The explosion dissipates in just a fraction of a second. Next, the sticky napalm.
Firing in 3, 2, 1, firing.
A huge plume of fire and a much greater spread of flaming material. 30 seconds after the explosion, droplets of napalm are still burning. Napalm's greater destructive potential is clear. But how would it have been used against the Egyptians in the Sinai? On Wednesday, June the 7th, Egypt's armored divisions were retreating west towards the Suez Canal. Their routes took them through 3 mountain passes.
In that state of panic, they were all trapped in the 3 passes in the Sinai and became a sitting duck for the Israeli Air Force.
Complete air superiority would mean that Yellow Shavit's squadron could strike the Egyptians at will. He can confirm that napalm bombs were used, and to devastating effect.
The napalm is a very cruel, very, very unpleasant kind of a bomb.
We saw like atom bomb, suddenly fire.
Essam Taraz was one of the Egyptian soldiers on the ground who witnessed the terrifying napalm attack.
All the sky was red color. Black and red, it is very difficult to explain.
You go over the target and then you feel the wow of the fire that came up. It's frightening even to think about it now, because the tank was caught in fire and the black smoke, like a huge chimney sucks this smoke up into the sky. It's terrible.
Hundreds of Egyptian tanks and trucks were engulfed in an inferno. This is film of the horrific aftermath of the napalm airstrikes. It has never been screened before. Yet for the Egyptians, the nightmare of their Sinai retreat was not yet over. Wednesday, June 7th, 1967. The Six-Day War was barely 2 days old, and the Egyptian army was disintegrating in the Sinai desert. Yet even in the searing heat of early June, the Israeli advance showed no sign of letting up. How could 2 armies, both used to such conditions, perform so differently? These Israeli paratroopers are preparing for a training march in the middle of summer. It's vital they're able to keep going in the blistering heat.
The first few days that I joined the army, there was a heat wave. It's like getting boiled in an oven, especially in the desert.
Before the march starts, the platoon medic checks the conditions his soldiers are going to encounter.
When soldiers are on the march, they have to drink about between 5 to 6 liters. Before the march, they start 6 hours before, and they drink every hour 1 liter.
Strict water drinking regulations were implemented by the Israeli army in 1959. Up until that point, the need for soldiers to avoid dehydration was appreciated only by medical officers such as Ezra Sohar.
In these days, the army used to issue 1 liter of water per day per soldier.
Sohar and a team of military medics decided to conduct a unique experiment with a group of soldiers by marching the entire length of Israel in August, the hottest month of the year. Every day, they covered 17 miles, with hourly rest breaks to take on water.
we found